the Countryside Podcasts with Chris Skinner.
We'll just walk round a little bit, hopefully we left the horse behind. Rats here. Chris Skinner is guiding us around High Ash Farm. It must be another Countryside podcast. And the weather's a bit more clement this week. It's still a beautiful summer's day, blue sky, but a little less hot.
Yes, Matthew, a very warm welcome, he says, with a big smile on his face, to High Ash Farm for yet another Countryside podcast. We're accompanied by Rat, the terrier, who's just heard his name, and so he started wagging his tail, but he's following various scents around. We're in an area which we haven't been in really much before. It's called Woodcock Wood. And it's so named because it was an area of coniferous trees, and that's one of my young buzzards. Wow. And I brought us into a pond area in the farm. This is unusual soil. It's blue clay, and you can actually see down near the bottom. So it contains water nearly all the year. There's perhaps a few thousand gallons left in the bottom. And that young buzzard is calling that distinctive high pitch. There, it's called a mew.
I can see him up flying.
Yeah, that's one of the parents.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's a parent. That's not the one that's calling. It's just flown over the top of the wood, one of the parents, and the youngster has spotted it and says, I'm here.
And the nest is somewhere up in the canopy
it's
here.
Just a little bit further down the wood. And this is only 4 acres, and it's kind of an overspill for buzzards this year. So we've got 3 pairs of buzzards nesting on the farm. And the reason I brought you here is because there's still some water. We're on the north half of High Ash Farm. The farm's roughly divided into 2 by a road called Caister Lane, which heads up through the middle of it. And the north side of the farm is completely devoid of natural areas of water, despite there being clay, because most of it is sandy, gravelly soil. So it's incredibly porous. It's almost egg timer soil, some of it. And this area of clay was dug out. We don't know its full history, but all around the village there were clay block houses in the 16th, 17th and 18th century, and many of the farm buildings were also made of clay, and so perhaps that's how these ponds, as they were dug. They were actually clay pits. The clay was mixed with straw or reed and puddled together and put into wooden formers and then allowed to dry out over the summer. And then you'd got 18-inch long blocks, roughly 6 inches high, and you'd put more wet clay between them when you laid them, then cover the outside with black tar. And that's how you got your clay block barns. As long as they were kept dry, they'd last hundreds of years, and then there were good old oak beams across the top of them. So we think probably this is a result, and it's quite a sizable hole, bearing in mind this was all dug by hand.
So this isn't natural at all. This is a man-made bowl
Yes.
for the clay, and here it is now. It looks like the water level has gone down, and it's all green in there,
Yes,
isn't it?
there's some algae on the top. It's actually one of the fern species. It floats on the top of the water. It's actually got a long and interesting scientific name. What we're looking at is called Azolla filiculoides. Oh, there's a buzzard just there.
Look at that.
That's one of the parents. Just checking that we're not predating this year's youngsters.
We're in the woods here, but we can see patches of blue sky, and there we've got a tantalising glimpse of him there.
Absolutely, right over our heads. So the importance of this pond has changed from the construction of buildings, and it's been left for probably 200 years or so, untouched, and sort of during the winter months it recharges itself because the water comes in through the soil all around the perimeter of the pond. It's called the water table, and where we're standing, we'd be chest deep in water. So it is a huge volume of water because
so this fills up entirely, does it?
Yes, it does. Yeah,
It's hard to think, isn't it? With that.
It absolutely is. And bear in mind, there's trees around the perimeter in places, but not much else. It's pretty well bare in the lower regions, as you can see all the way around. But there's a small tree. It was formerly an ash tree that's fallen in. It's not very big. It's not much thicker than the diameter of your leg, really, and it's fallen into the water. And right near the end of it, you can see that the green, the algae on the top, the little water fern, there's a bare patch there, and that's where birds are coming to drink and to bathe, because it's not very deep at that point. So they walk down the tree that's fallen in and then jump off the end into the water. And I've got a video of one of the young buzzards coming in, and you can see there's a little camera there on the pole.
Oh yes, one of your automatic video cameras.
Yes, that's one of the trail cams dotted all over the farm. And I did have to laugh when I saw that, so hopefully we'll post it on this Sunday's High Ash Farm Facebook page, so you can examine what we're talking about and the importance of water for birds. I was going to say for birds, but all around our various different mammal tracks. We have deer visiting, badgers, foxes, all come and drink. And the largest of them all is there's the odd horse that ventures into the woodland from the nearby pasture, and the large footprints around the edge. Look, so we've got elephants visiting a waterhole in the Serengeti here, but not so, they're horse hoof prints.
Well, we've now, for householders in this locality, got a hosepipe ban, haven't we?
Yes.
Which is the first time in many years.
Exactly, and particularly here, water is hugely precious, because under High Ash Farm, under this layer of clay, I should say, there's a completely horizontal flat plate of chalk, and in that chalk has been water that's been trapped really since the last ice age. It's absolutely incredibly high quality, and we're abstracting that. Well, I say we, the local water authority, which is Anglian Water, are abstracting huge amounts from under where we're standing, although the pump is about half to 3/4 of a mile away from us, and that's supplying Norwich with high quality water. It's blended with water from the Wensum, and also all the villages around North Norwich here for quite a distance out, and we're abstracting well over 20,000 cubic metres a day. So Mount Everest is 9,000 metres high, so it's twice the height of Mount Everest, a metre square. So that's how precious the water is under. So we wouldn't be allowed at High Ash Farm to abstract water for irrigation of the crops. We have to take the weather as it comes, and as it's such a dry year, I thought we'll start off next to some water just to illustrate how important it is, not just for humans, but for wildlife as well.
But as these natural sources dry up through this very dry spell,
yes,
then the little patches like this become all the more valuable, don't
Absolutely. It's tiny, but wildlife's very good at finding water sources, and I notice there's a whole variety of birds and mammals. The secrets are given away in daylight and at night time by the camera, because that camera works in the dark as well. And last night, I hope the video's good enough. I hope we might even get another one for tonight. We had a tawny owl, a barn owl, and a little owl all come in on the end of that little bit and all have a drink from the water. You forget that owls' main diet is small mammals, and normally there's enough moisture for them, but because of the intensity of the heat in daylight hours, they obviously need to have a drink as well, and so it's really unusual to see an owl coming in for a drink. So day and night time, this is a busy watering hole, and on top of the floating fern there, which does turn bright pink. It's also called flamingo weed. So when it comes into flower, you get little fern shoots coming out of the top of it. It's quite spectacular, and some of the girls call it the flamingo pond because they used to ride through this area of woodland. And on top of that, there's literally thousands of pond skaters which we can't see. So if I take you down any further, we'll be in the muddy zone because obviously the water level's dropping. You can see on the far side there it's probably dropped about a foot and left the water fern high and dry as the water gets consumed or evaporates in the heat.
We're still in July,
yes,
and there's a long way to go yet. So are you concerned about this?
I certainly am. At the worst, I can bring a water bowser in and empty some from the farm duck pond, which is really well charged at the moment.
Is that spring-fed?
Yes, it is, yes. So we have a spring there, and there was a well in the middle of the farmyard when I was a child, and it's been covered over now. In fact, there were 4 wells there. One of the wells to supply the farm cottages, one to supply the farmhouse, and one for all the agricultural buildings. They were bricked to about 30 feet down, but they're incredibly deep, well over 100 feet. So the effort that went in, I think we all forget. We just walk into our kitchen or bathroom, turn the tap on and expect water to come out. But it was a very different story 100, 150 years ago. In very recent history, actually, many people had to go down the garden and wind a handle and bring a bucket up from the well at the bottom of the garden. I can see you smiling, but that brings back a memory of my childhood because there was no water mains on at the farm at all until the 1950s.
So from what you say then, what is the greatest luxury of modern life? Is it your top-of-the-range Mercedes? Is it your 50-inch television? No, it's a tap.
Absolutely. And other countries are aghast that we would use drinking water to flush the loo. You couldn't make it up because it's such a precious resource, and when it's under threat like this, or you have a hosepipe ban, which is nothing really, you do start to appreciate where we've come from or where we've got to at this point in history. It always fascinates me. Nevertheless, this is a hugely important little area. Even butterflies, I've noticed while we're talking that bees land in on the top of the water fern there and have a little drink as well, and you can see them coming in and out, and the whole thing is alive with pond skaters which dance over the top, and as we're about 10 feet away, they're difficult to see. But nevertheless, it's a really important sort of joining point, if you like, in the countryside for animals to come and have a drink, and just showing for them at least how important water is.
Billing and cooing, the pigeons of High Ash Farm, among the cast of characters that we meet each week.
And I'm the next character that you're likely to meet on the Countryside podcast, and we've got a small favour to ask. There are certain costs involved which we can't avoid. What we're asking for is a small contribution to help the running costs of this podcast.
And you can find all the details on the High Ash Farm website, and you can make a monthly or one-off payment. Everything's gratefully received, and let's keep this marvellous slice of wildlife podcasting going with Chris Skinner and the pigeons.
Why not? Yes, it's absolutely fantastic.
The Flamingo Pond on High Ash Farm, and I'm not going to go for a swim just yet.
No, you'd come out a rather different colour to what you are at the moment. Nevertheless, it's hugely, hugely important.
We've moved a few hundred yards to one of Chris's marvellous wildflower meadows. This is a south-facing meadow, enjoying the sunshine today, and the insect life, the butterflies and everything else going on just above it is something to behold, isn't it?
Matthew, we're both spoiled. Some weeks during the winter months, I have a job to find a topic for the Countryside podcasts, and at this time of the year, the subjects are coming in at such a rate of knots and such a variety. I don't know whether to do birds that are starting to flock. We touched on summer butterflies last week, and we had a visitor at one of the wildflower fields that we just looked at last week, and it was a 6-spot Burnet moths. But as I was studying the butterflies and just looking out for them, I forgot to actually talk about them. Now, in front of us, in full sunshine, we've got moths flying here, there, and there's 5 just in front of us.
Just here, just a few yards away, yes.
And they're called 6-spot Burnet moths. And we have a huge colony of them here. Yeah, I call them a colony because they're rather lazy, they're a little bit sluggish, they like living in one particular area, so once you find one, you have literally hundreds of them in a particular location.
It's a lovely impression of red you get with those wings going so fast.
Yes, yeah, they're rather cumbersome looking flyers, but they can actually fly quite quickly, and so on top of the wings, for this particular species of Burnet moth, there are 6 spots. Gets a little bit confusing because there's another closely related species which has 5 spots on the wings, and so the moth enthusiasts get very excited about all these different forms of it. And that's a butterfly that escaped us last week when we were doing our summer butterflies, and that's called a common blue. It's a shame it's got common at the beginning of its name. Another common blue there. Just they're stunningly beautiful, and about sort of 40 mil wingspan, just over the inch, really.
A lovely pastel blue
It
colour.
is, yes. Remember, we looked early on in the year at the holly blue butterfly, which is unique amongst British butterflies with 2 broods. These just have a single brood usually. But let's just have a look. If we just walk up closely, we're being spoilt by, there is a 6-spot Burnet moth, and whichever way it turns, it changes colour from black underneath with the crimson spots on the top, and if it moves a bit, the black turns to green. It depends how the sun is catching it. And at this time of the year, it's on its favourite food plant. It will feed on field scabious, which is the pastel blue ones a bit further up the hill there. They like that. But this one is called knapweed. It's spelt with a K. And it's also got a nickname called hardheads, because once it's finished flowering, it forms these very hard heads. And it's just coming into flower, and it's the last main nectar flow of Hyashia's pollen and nectar fields that flower at this time of the year. So very little follows this. And then in a month or so, once we're allowed to, under stewardship scheme, we mow this as close to the ground as we can. And but having said that, there's some interesting lots of species here, because this is full of the little green caterpillars, and they're quite surprising. So what happens is the 6-spot burnets now lay their eggs. The eggs then hatch on their food plant, which is the green and yellow flower down at the bottom there. That's called birdsfoot trefoil. You can see them in flower. That's a legume. So you've got green leaves and a bright yellow flower at the top. That's their food plant for the caterpillar. So the eggs hatch and the little caterpillars hatch out, and they feed right through the summer months. The little caterpillars about 30 millimetres long, about an inch long, mainly green with black dots on them, and they're quite hairy, but they're sort of rather like me, rather short and plump. Let's put it like that. And They then hibernate right through the winter as a caterpillar on these huge fields. And there are thousands of them per acre, thousands of the caterpillars.
And somehow they survive.
Yes, because they're not very tempting to birds. There was a secret, because years ago butterfly collectors used to kill their specimens in hydrogen cyanide inside a bottle. You'd put your butterfly in and it would just go to sleep. And the early butterfly collectors noticed something strange about Burnet moths. When they put them in the cyanide bottle, the butterflies would carry on flying about for a considerable time, untouched by the hydrogen cyanide. And it wasn't until some years later that somebody analysed the fact that when you pick a Burnet moth up in your hand, first of all it exudes a little clear liquid, followed by a kind of greenish liquid, and that it comes from the thoracic glands on the body of the butterfly. When that was analysed, they were quite shocked. It was pretty strong hydrogen cyanide inside the juice. So the butterflies advertise the fact that eat me and you won't like it, but they advertise it with these bright, bright colours. And you wouldn't think moths would do that. It's one of the mysteries of the world that some of our night-flying butterflies are incredibly brightly coloured, almost equal to some of our butterfly species like the peacock and the red admiral. But the nighttime equivalent of butterflies, obviously the moths, are also brightly coloured, and some of them have these sort of strange chemicals in their build-up. So the caterpillars hibernate as caterpillars over the winter. They then carry on feeding on these lovely fields once it all starts to green up again next spring. And then the caterpillars pupate. They'll climb up grass stems, and we've just found one here, and they make these little paper-like cocoons here, and the little caterpillar goes through that wonderful word which we've used before, metamorphosis, and changes from a caterpillar to a pupa and comes out as a six-spot Burnet moth. And even before it's left the little cocoon, a male moth, if it's a female that's emerging, will come and mate with her, or if it's a male, it will fly and locate a female nearby.
This little paper cocoon here is just attached, beautifully.
Yeah, it's sewn beautifully, isn't
onto
it?
the sort of mid part of a stem of grass.
Yes, yeah, grass is a favourite. They'll also choose any tall vegetation quite high up. So we don't know why it's so high. Some of the Burnet moth species have their cocoons almost at ground level. And we don't know if it's because of it's countering any flooding risk. So if you have your cocoon halfway up a grass plant, and so this one's a good 18 inches off the ground, really interesting. So fascinating history. Once you look at all these species we share the countryside with, it's quite amazing how many different varieties and species. So the lady's bed straw down at the bottom here is almost finished flowering now, and that's just beginning to dry. The seeds of some of these plants are just establishing a wildflower field are hugely expensive. There's another six-spot Burnet just in front of us here. What a lovely sight. And this one, we've got the sun behind us here. This one is green, iridescent bottle green. And if I count the spots, 2, 4, 6 spots on each of the wings. And it's reflecting the sunlight. Just such an attractive... If I turn it round the other way, it goes black.
From green to black.
And it's still the same moth. So, and it's feeding on the knapweed head. So you've got the purple of the knapweed there, or hardheads, and the colours of the moth together are absolutely extraordinary. So there we are, just things to look out for in the countryside at this time of the year. But we're nearing the end, which has been of the wildflower fields flowering period, which has sort of been brought forward really by this enhanced long period of dry weather. The temperatures are one thing, but there's just no prospect of rain for yet another week ahead of us here in the eastern counties of the UK. So we really are drought stricken. So I'm not going to ask you to get a spade and start digging post holes for me. It's just impossible. The ground has gone to iron at the moment. But there we are, just something else to watch out for in the countryside if you're lucky enough to be able to go for a walk.
And the swallows enjoy this area as well. Can you hear them serenading?
Yes, they are. They're flying all round. Butterflies flying past. You don't know which way to look, but they're making the most of the hedgerows and the rides here, the swallows this is, to gather the sort of aerial plankton, I call it. It's a good time of year for insects, and they're all busy rearing either their second broods, and quite soon they'll be on the third brood. That's Rat, the demented terrier. Yeah, he has to have a word in every podcast that we do. That wasn't a very pleasant. I think there's some swearing going on there from the dog.
Well, it's coming up to the middle of the day on this particular visit to High Ash Farm, but of course things start much earlier than this, and Chris often has an early alarm call.
Good morning, everybody. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's been what we call a tropical night here in Norfolk. The temperature's not dropped below 20 degrees centigrade. It's been extremely hot for the last few days, and I'm just walking down my hallway and into my porch. There's some dark clouds outside, so it's threatening to rain. In fact, the first raindrops are just arriving. There's some flashing going on in the distance as hopefully a thunderstorm's heading our way, because we're desperate for more rain at this time of the year. I really worry about the trees and the lack of moisture for them this particular year. We've had periods of hot, dry, record-breaking temperatures here in Norfolk. Anyway, in my porch, almost throughout the year, apart from the very coldest months, I have ants. And they're black garden ants, and I feed them once they start becoming active in early spring. I have a tiniest little dish here right in front of me, and there's a few ants in there this morning having some early breakfast, about probably 50, and all around the parents on the windowsill here, the ants are going round frantically, about 4 or 5 times the normal speed. It's a complete blur. They're tiny, they're black. Oh, big flash of lightning. Wow, that's quite something. The porch suddenly lit up. It is getting light, as it's only sort of 4 in the morning. I'm ahead of the dawn chorus this morning. That's usually about 4:15. We might hear some thunder as well in a minute. That's quite spectacular. Now, over the last 2 or 3 days, the windows inside the porch here have been absolutely covered in thousands of small winged ants. Now, I've been studying them for years and got quite a close, well, if you can have a relationship with an ant, then I suppose that's what you'd call my interest. It's sort of focused on their social life, really, and the way they live together. A few weeks back on one of the podcasts, we did swarming bees. Now, this time of the year, the ants swarm. It's the only way to describe it. But this year, it's been rather different in that the inside of the windows with these small winged ants, and I know what they are, they're male flying ants, and they're all ready to mate with the females. But there's been no females to this point in time. none at all. And the females are about twice the size of the winged males, quite long bodies and 4 translucent wings. And they normally sort of plaster the inside of the windows, and I managed to get them off and take them outside, have a little very soft dustpan and brush, sweep them off, and they all fly off. And the swallows down the farmyard, which are very active when the ants swarm, probably gobble up some of them at least. Anyway, this year it's been different because 2 or 3 days in succession, the male ants have swarmed. They've kind of asked to go out, and all the little worker ants that are left behind, they're sexually immature ants that spend the year tending the queen ant in the nest, which must be either on the outside of the porch or in one of the big wooden beams here, or even in some of my large flower pots, one of which is right in front of me, and the whole centre, the soil has been kind of hollowed out and the nest opened up, ready to release these swarms of ants. And it is the most amazing sight. So these male ants then fly off, and I've been scratching my head as to wonder why no female unmated ants have been about. And this morning, it's hot, it's thundery, it's very early in the morning. All the paments around me are covered in almost entirely female ants with all their long wings. And they're now starting to go out the window. It's early in the morning, it's going to rain, but this late summer, if you like to call it that, it's summer to them anyway, it's a short year, they're all ready to sort of fly off now and mate. But the question is in my head is, why have they separated like this? And of course, they're all from the same nest. They're brothers, the male ants, which are slightly smaller, as I explained, the female ants, the sisters, and of course they would interbreed. So the male ants went off ahead of time, hoping to meet up with some female ants from other colonies. And all over my lawn there's lots of ant colonies, all over the farm in fact. Different species of ants, red ants and black garden ants, which these particular ones are. And so they then mate. The female ants, the virgin queens at that point, mate whilst they're flying, and the male ants then die pretty soon afterwards. They don't have a long life. They are laid from unfertilised eggs, that's the male ants, and the female ants from fertilised eggs, but they've been specially tended by the worker ants. So the colony kind of works at one. It's like its own sort of ecosystem, if you like. It's a sort of continuous working body, and ants are absolutely amazing to watch them working. So the female ants then mate whilst they're flying, drop down to the ground, take their own wings off, and then they will hibernate over the winter and start a new colony off somewhere, either in an old log. Some may well return to the original nest, but that is quite unlikely, although the ant colony's been here for the last 20 years since I've lived in this property, and maybe longer than that. So it's a bit unusual to have more than one queen ant in a nest, and certainly it would be very unusual in bees, for instance, which also swarm. You would never have more than one queen in a colony of bees. So today seems to be the day, although there's thunderclouds threatening. Once they have passed over, I think all these queens will exit the porch, fly up quite high, have their mating flight, and then do what the other ants do, drop down to ground, start a new colony off. So it just fascinates me. And my porch is the little paments all around the big windowsill, then 9-inch by 9-inch square paments. The porch itself's made from quite large oak timbers. It's covered in soil because the ants open up the nests from the flower pots, and obviously there's some nests just outside the porch. And I'm just watching the windowsill through the glass, and the ants out there are just as active. They're just going round like clockwork motors, but at really high speed, whereas normally in the morning and during the daytime, when I come in and just sort of take my boots off for lunch, for instance, and just watch them for a few seconds, they're going a quarter this speed, but it's obviously the message has gone right through the colony. So if you ever sort of move a sheet of tin in the garden or something like that and come across an ant nest, what you look at, the ants are swarming about, is you see these white, what look like ants' eggs, but they're not the eggs, they're cocoons. And in warm weather, out in the woodland in particular, with the yellow garden ant out there, or the wood ants, the eggs are brought up just under the surface of the corrugated iron, and that helps to keep them warm and incubate them so that they hatch a little bit quicker. If you do lift the tin up, the ants will quickly collect the cocoons that contain all the babies, some of which will be male ants and female ants that are going to swarm later on. They'll bury those down to cover them up because that's a favourite food of one of the woodpecker species here, the green woodpecker, which spends hours on my lawn just probing about with its long tongue. They don't have a chance to build big ant hills out here because the lawn's mown occasionally, and that would flatten the hills, but the nest, burrow and chamber, a whole sort of labyrinth of tracks in under the soil, would not be destroyed by the mowing, so you don't often have ant hills. Some of the ancient meadows on the farm, we have really large mounds, sometimes 2 feet across and 2 feet tall as well. They look like gigantic molehills, and that's the work of the ants as well. But anyway, I just thought I'd share this with you. It's an early morning treat. Let me just stand outside, go out. Yep, the pennant's outside the porch. It's just spitting with rain. It's threatening. I'm looking down to the southwest, towards London, about 100 miles away from where I'm standing, and the sky does look rather promising, so it's spitting heavily with rain at the moment, but just one flash of lightning, one thunderclap only since I've been talking, so hopefully we'll get a bit of a deluge now, and that'll help clear the air, because the humidity from last night was made it rather unbearable. So just going to walk down the farmyard now and undo the workshop, ready for another day's work on the farm. But I hope you enjoyed my ants. I love them to bits.
Going to round off after that very early morning look at the private life of an ant. We're going to round off this week's podcast, as is traditional, with some of your emails. And Kelly Thrower says, I have a client who I garden for who only just had house martins turn up 10 days ago. So this was at the end of June, as according to the date of the email. After 2 years away, they're back, and there's about 5 of them. They're going in and out of nest cups. This is near King's Lynn, not so far away from blueberry fields. I just found it very interesting, and yours roughly about the same time as well.
Oh, yes, thank you for that, Kelly. Really interesting phenomena. We've still got house martins at the farm on the mud, repairing nests somewhere. Now, I don't know if something tragic happened because of the heat that we had just before the house martins started gathering mud, and they lost their broods and started to rebuild new nests, or the fact somebody netted off areas. But I have a feeling these are young house martins, and they are notorious in arriving much later than the first batch or of house martins that arrive here in the UK in early April. So that, fingers crossed, it's young birds arriving and nesting for the first time. So you and I both have seen the same phenomena. Thank you for that.
Chris in North Yorkshire has been talking to us regularly recently about the march of progress of farm machinery and the impact it has on the wildlife. And Chris says, on a country estate up here, I've witnessed the rapid decline of our much-loved curlews, mainly due to the cutting of silage in May. When the fields were cut for hay in July, the young of field nesting birds such as the curlew became a bit older and had had a good chance of being able to escape. When we changed to silage harvesting in May, I noticed pairs of adult curlew wandering about after the cut and baled silage calling for their young, and this continued for the next few years until the adults were too old to breed, and then no curlews in that traditional breeding field. That's sad, isn't it?
It is sad, and it's really common, and I've noticed the same thing now. All around the farm here, many people do cut their silage really, really early. It's a way of conserving grass and also ensuring that you, unless you have a year like this year, normally you'll have 2 cuts. And it affects the curlew population more than most birds. And I do know the RSPB are aware of this and the change in agricultural techniques, and they're actually collecting curlew eggs before the mowers get to the fields, hatching the young, but making sure that the young don't have any human contact. Otherwise you get treated like mum, and humans become the parents rather than curlews, and then they're released into the wild in appropriate habitat. Fingers crossed, it's a measure that's really, really hard work, but you have to ask if it's worthwhile in the long run in helping to stop curlew numbers declining to such an extent as what they have done. But anyway, thank you very much, Chris, for all your comments, particularly the kind ones at the end.
I know one of your neighbours had a terrific curlew field that we visited, well, probably 10 years ago now, but driving past that the other day now, it's quite an established field for the dreaded solar panels,
yes.
Isn't it? It's full of solar panels.
Yes, it is, and it's right in the area which is absolutely suitable for them. We're in East Anglia here. It's not really an East Anglian bird, but if you have particularly good habitat, you will attract them in. And stone curlew is another one that's really unrelated, and so they're some more in the Brecks than in this particular area. But it's really sad when birds lose their habitat completely for complete change from farming land to solar panels.
We're about a month behind on this one from Sally Livett in Devon, because we get so many, don't we, that there's sometimes a backlog. So apologies, Sally. She says she's a huge fan of yours. I was interested to hear that you've had so many painted ladies. At the moment, I'm holidaying on the kayak around the islands off the northeast coast of Sicily. How marvellous. And there are hundreds of painted ladies here heading across the sea towards the Italian mainland. It's astonishing such tiny, fragile butterflies can migrate, but I don't think these ones will ever make it to England.
Well, no, that's the whole surprise. We don't know because we are not able to fit satellite tags to butterflies yet, but what we do know is that they're really powerfully, they're migratory when the habitat down at their end fails to yield pollen and nectar. They migrate northwards, and they are really powerful flyers. They certainly come up from southern France, which isn't a huge deal further. They don't breed, they don't survive our winter here in the UK. They will lay their eggs on thistle plants, but we had thousands of them here at the farm. It was a real eruption of them, and it's just astonishing to think of the distance they've come. But over the last 2 to 3 weeks, we haven't seen any painted ladies. They've either moved off. The other thing that's happened is there's no clouded yellows here for 2 reasons. That the winds have almost been in the northerly direction, so they'll be flying into the wind over those couple of thousand miles that they migrate northwards. So that's sort of put a stop to the migration.
And let's just mention Anna, who's emailed us, just wanting to message you again, she says, and say how much I love listening. 6 weeks ago, I sustained a hairline fracture from running, and after several misdiagnoses, some weeks later, my hip broke. I'm only 49, and it's been quite a shock. Most difficult has been my inability to walk. It's really impacted my mental health. Anyway, this weekend I've been able to start driving again, and I'm walking about 1.5 miles a day using one crutch up the lane and over the field near my home. I sit at the top of the field and look over the Wenning Valley and the Forest of Bowland beyond, enjoying the bird song and many butterfly species. In fact, this morning I've greatly enjoyed identifying them at the same time as you were talking about the ones that you and Matthew had come across on High Ash Farm. And here's a photo, she says, and there's also a photo that she sent us of a young deer, and she wonders if it's a red deer.
Yes, it's possibly a red deer. You're in the right area up there in the Wenning Valley. There's a whole variety of different deer species. It's quite a large specimen, but to be honest, it's a good 100 metres away, and it's really difficult to get a positive identification. But just look at the pictures that have been sent through to us with looking over the Wenning Valley there, just stunning. And a picture of a pair of legs and a single crutch, obviously sitting down having a rest there. It's absolutely amazing. So thank you very much, Anna, for that wonderful email and the pictures to go with it.
And here's to a speedy recovery.
Yes.
Maybe go easy on the running in future.
I think so, yes. Slow down, yes. Take the crutch with you.
We've always slowed down, haven't we? Although you were telling me earlier you were a cross-country champion.
Yes, I was. I ran for the county in the late 1960s. It was quite a feat, and on the longest cross-country one we did, I actually did a marathon. I did over 26 miles, and I suffered for my efforts for about 2 to 3 days afterwards with blisters, which I'd never had before. So, yes, I'm not particularly fast, but I'm stubborn, is the word.
And I'm built for comfort, not for speed.
Right.
So we'll leave it there, shall we? Thanks once again for tuning in, and to also all of you sent an email. It's wonderful to hear from you. If you'd like to send a question or a comment or anything else, the email address is chris@highashfarm.com. And please do visit the website as well, highashfarm.com/podcast, and you can go there to find out ways of helping us out with donations, either regular or one-off. Everything is gratefully received.
Yes, and hopefully we'll have some pictures for you to enjoy on High Ash Farm Facebook, and we'll be back next week to do it all again, so please join us again for that.
I'll race you back to the farmhouse.
Okay, I'm away.